never know how that plays out. Thank you very much, Sarah, Antonella, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to introduce this fantastic conference. So, since we are in a former church, I thought it would be good to give you a couple of lessons we've learned, confessions if you want, from our experiences so far in dealing with creative reuse, the reimagining of how culture can play a role in society and economy. As has already been said by Sarah, Europeana is a network. It's a network of institutions, of creative industries, of people who believe that we can fundamentally play a role in creating a new society, or at least influencing it in a positive way, either on a social level, on an economic level, or at least by making sure that this industry and the people who work in it are more innovative, and that together we can do things that each of us alone would never be able to do. So, as I said, Europeana is a network. I think that's really important to understand, which is run through projects. Europeana Space is a very important one. We'll look forward to all the results. Europeana Fashion, I can see lots of people who already were in many of the projects at Europeana. So, we have reconceived ourselves over the past months. Europeana has been in existence for about 5 years. We've collected 30 million objects from 2,500 institutions from every member state in Europe. And we think that's a great accomplishment. That's really the accomplishment of all the institutions who participate. We've reconceptualized ourselves as a platform. We don't like to see ourselves as a portal, a place only where you can view a shop window, but we want to play a real active role in making the reuse of this cultural heritage happen. So we'd like to see Europeana as a node in that concept, where we stimulate the cultural institutions in Europe to give their very best material, so that we can then make sure that end users, wherever they are, Wikipedia, Facebook, etc., can make use of it in a useful way. And what we're going to talk about today is our experiences in reuse. So I'm going to talk you through a couple of lessons we've learned, in particular because I'm also representing here Europeana Creative, one of the projects who really aims, like Europeana Space, to make all these things happen. So what I've been extremely clear over the past year and a half that we've worked with Europeana Creative is that content really is what matters. It's nice to have metadata, but at the end of the day, people who want to do creative things want to have something real to work with. So I'm going to talk you through where we currently stand. This massive pile up here represents all the cultural heritage that is available in Europe. The top 10% of that is the things that we've digitized. Not a small feat. I mean, there's still 300 million objects which have been digitized. Books, libraries, museums, archives, everything is in there. But the scary thing is that only 2% of that top 10% is actually licensed for reuse, explicitly licensed for reuse. So that's all the Creative Commons licenses. It could be public domain. It doesn't necessarily have to be free. I want to make that point very clearly. But that's what we have to play with. That's what we're playing against. So with Europeana and all the projects that have contributed to it, we started to work on that. We started to say that 30 million objects, the minimal thing we need to do with that is to make sure that most of that is reusable. So if you look at the diagram I showed here, we have made sure over the past year through a very active campaign, this was painful and very laborious, to be honest. We now have, and this was a couple of months ago, 35% of all the metadata in Europeana, of all the data in Europeana, I should say, is reusable. Now, I think that's a decent starting point, but our ambitions are higher. So we're currently actually already at 47%, and we think that we can grow the database in sheer numbers, but we can also grow the component of reusable material. The point of all this is that we'll have less metadata, which looks like this. We have some of this in our database. I've blocked out where it came from because I'm not here to shame anyone. But some of it just doesn't even have a thumbnail. It doesn't have any really useful metadata, and it has a free access, no reuse license on it. Nice to look at, but nothing to play with. And sometimes it even leads you, if you follow the link, to something like this. Now this is extremely frustrating for anyone who wants to reuse the material. So what we'd like to see is much more of this. This comes from the Rijksmuseum. That's a very good example of people who've taken a huge leap in the digital age. Useful metadata, may have geolocation or other subject classes. We know it's public domain marked, and if you follow the link, you will come to a very nice high-resolution image, which actually allows you to zoom in to the level where you can actually do something useful with it. So we started experimenting with that. We've developed a website, an interface to creatives, Europeana Labs it's called, and we've started highlighting all the stuff that we think fits the criteria that people need. So here you see a list of things that we say, we know this is reusable because it has high standards of quality, it has the reusable license, and it has a direct link to where the thing actually lives. So what I'm trying to say here is that we need to make a very concerted effort, all of us, in the Europeana network, to make sure that we drive ourselves towards this. And we're in the process of coming up with a framework. We set up task forces for that, where we would like to come to a strategy, if you want, that we can share with cultural institutions, which will make it very explicit and clear that Europeana is a place where everyone is welcome. If you just follow the minimal criteria, which will be anything in our licensing framework, it will have a minimal set of metadata. It may or may not have a direct link, and it has a thumbnail or preview. You can already work with us. We're happy. It's great. But if you deliver more things, if you deliver more useful metadata, a direct link, and higher resolution images, then we can do a lot more with it. Then you're actually reimagining the world from a reuse perspective. Then we can make you available in education, we can make you available through hackathons, we can make you available on Wikipedia where you generate lots of traffic. So this is the basic concept that we're working towards, and I'd very much welcome everyone in the Europeana Space project if we could join forces in this one. So the takeaways on this is that we need to standardize how we talk about reuse. The second takeaway is that we'll develop a content checker in Europeana technical stack, which will allow you to surface the material that is available for reuse. I think when Europeana Space starts to work on technology, we should also try to implement that as well. And the final thing is, if we start to collect new data, new content, new fantastic things, then hopefully all of that we were able to bring that back into that central repository. Lesson number 2, because we have talked to a few developers and these are the things that they said to us. Okay, it's great that you have good content, but we need an interface where it's absolutely clear how you can use it, APIs, documentation, and an interface. So we started working with personas, a few of them mostly developer related, and we ended up with that Europeana Labs interface that we talked about. That currently gets about 3,000 visits a month. We have 1,700 developers who receive our newsletter. We're quite happy with that, but we're not even close to where we need to be. So we developed a workshop. That's what you do in this environment. You develop workshops. You talk. This was in Barcelona last month in one of our labs, our physical labs. I know you have what you call spaces here, our labs in Europeana Creative. And we started reimagining. So what should the ideal world look like if you look at it from a developer's perspective, from an entrepreneur who wants to do things, maybe from an artist? And we came to a couple of conclusions. We mapped it out on a business model, and we found out that Europeana Space is not yet that playground for creativity. It's still cumbersome to work with. It doesn't have all the content yet that we need, and we need technological investments from it. We also understood that working with physical labs, it always sounds very sexy, but also a bit ephemeral. What is a lab? Is it just a physical space that you can go to, pick up a phone and go to, or is it something more involved? And I think we're coming to the conclusion that labs that are just there will not be part of this ecosystem. You need to be able to work with the cultural institutions, with the creatives, with anyone that matters, designers, and work on that virtually and physically. So again, I'd like to encourage that we pool resources. All the things that you'll be reimagining here and imagining, we hope to be able to bring together into this interface. The third lesson is we need to make our challenges worthwhile. I think we've been through a phase where hackathons were very worthwhile exercises. It allowed developers to play with material. And that was good. It gave us the feeling that it's interesting enough for a developer to actually show up and spend 24 hours of his time on it. And it resulted in lots of prototypes which gave us ideas of things that could happen. So we're now moving into the next phase, which we call challenges, which, if you want, is an extended hackathon. We give people 3 months at a time to think about what they could do. We ask them to think it through a little bit more, so there's a business model behind it. And then we select the winners. So we did so with Europeana Creative twice now. We had one in the spring on education in Brussels. We had a couple of winners. That was great. We spent some time in helping them redevelop their things. And we learned from it. We learned that you need to take even more time to do this. So this was the second one, which was only recently in September. Yes, Lizzie, that is you. And that one went even better. So the candidates that we got to select were better. The quality of the entries was better. And we're quite happy with the two winners. One is called Buitenplaatsen, which is a Dutch word. It allows you through an app to find useful information in a specific cultural arena, which we think we can develop into something more international. And the second one, Time Patch, allows photographic collections to be geotagged and placed and organized. And we think these two are actually worthwhile really spending some time in. But again, the lessons we took from it is you really need to invest the time in it as a project, as people, to make it work. We need to be very specific about the desired outcomes of this. Just asking people to play with your stuff is not going to cut the mustard anymore. It needs to be specific. And the third one is perhaps the most important, and we've not cracked that yet. So what does a winner get at the end of the day? At a hackathon you could get away with, there's free pizza and beer at the end. With challenges, we make it a little bit more interesting, so there may be an iPad or something like that, and we'll help you, we'll support you with IP issues, with content selections, etc. But perhaps that's not enough. Perhaps we need to take this a step further. Perhaps you need to make sure that there is a real project at the end of it that is going to be realized by these developers, like architects do. The fourth lesson, because then we start talking about incubation, which is again a very strange word. It always makes me think of chickens. How can we help these people go from a wild idea into something real, the businesses that Sarah talked about? How can we show the Europeans and the European Commission and everyone else that this is not just a playground anymore? We started thinking about that in 3 or 4 different areas. So we think the Labs portal can really cater to developers in particular as an interface. We should develop real incubation services. And we have channels that we use to reach out to markets that we can't reach ourselves. So we're talking, for example, to iTunes U. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I think they can reach educational markets and teachers probably better than we can. So we start to think about incubation in 5 steps. The first one is the hackathons or the challenges. How do you co-create an idea? How do you co-create something that is interesting and worthwhile to even pursue to the next step? We're developing methodologies in Europeana Creative that I think I'm quite proud of. I think we now are in a much better place than we were a couple of months back, and we hope to be able to transfer that knowledge to Europeana space and learn from you. And then you come to the next bit. We already give support on content, on IP, maybe on business modeling. But like I said, the carrot at the end of it should probably be something more substantial. So we're experimenting and investigating what we could do with crowdfunding, for example, and how we can really bring in investors. So this is an example of something we are experimenting with. This is a platform called Goteo, which is developed by Platonique, one of the partners in the project, and we hope to use this to be able to get crowds, whatever kind of crowds you could think of, could be cultural institutions, could be you, who are willing to invest little bits of money to help it just to come to the next step. And beside that, you get to the next step, it will also give you confidence, and it will give you credibility when you start to talk to real investors. And we're developing that network of investors with a company called Peaceful Fish. Those won't be the only ones. I think these people can tap into a specific network of investors who are interested not only in making a fast buck, but who are also interested in creating some social innovation, things that are closer to what we are about in this community. So the lessons we took from that is that it's really important and good that we give the business-related support that we currently give, but we need to do more. And it takes time. It takes time to build up a network of investors. So it's something we need to cooperate on and really have a bit of time for. My final lesson is don't kill your darlings, but spoil them excessively. And I think we're pretty bad at that. We are living in an environment where we like to be democratic, we like to be nice to each other. Every idea is worthwhile pursuing. But if we want to really enter into this market, we'll probably need to be more selective. We'll need to be able to say, this idea can fly, and this one can't. And that's really hard to do, but it is necessary. And the example that we've worked with in Europeana Creative is Van Gogh yourself. You may have heard of that, you may not. It started very early on in the project with an ideation process, prototyping, etc. Lots of good ideas came out of it, and we really made an effort to make a selection based on criteria that we set beforehand. How much viability does it have? How difficult is it to make? How much technology is involved? There was even one criteria, how Europeana-esque is it? Europeanability was the word. Yeah, what's the Europeanability of this? And you may laugh about that, but it's actually an interesting one. If you develop something, you can't use the Europeana database for it. It may be a good idea, but it may not be a good idea in our context. So that's something that we need to understand. Lots of good ideas from it, and something actually came out of it, something really useful. Low tech, very viral. It allows you to take images or iconic paintings and recreate them. It's a fun exercise to do. We do them all the time now at every conference we go to. But people, it's not just us, it's people on the street are doing this. People at museum night in London did this, hundreds of them. And they spread it around because it's fun to show to your family, etc., etc. So this may not be the most highbrow intellectual form of culture that you could think of, but it is playful. There's an element of education in it. It tells you something about composition, about art, and we think this is something that we need to pursue. So, example. And the point I'm trying to make is that we have made that very difficult decision to say, okay, maybe we haven't allocated enough months, enough resources to this particular, it was a prototype, it was meant to be an example, but we think this is so cool and interesting. We're going to take resources from somewhere else and try to push this, because this is worthwhile pursuing. We're not there yet, and it may fail altogether in the greater scheme of things, but I think this is the direction we should be taking. And the final one is this one, which was just released. This is another, let's say, sister project called Apps for Europe. And they're using high-tech technology, beacons, which allow you to have much more specific geolocation information that you could get through GPS, which will, we think, has large potential for cities like Venice, and in this case, the city of Siena. Does it run? Yes, it does run. So, just to give you a feel for what this is, and what I also very much like is that they've made the investment in creating a nice looking, good video, because this is what sells. So you'll see the idea is not completely innovative. You walk around Siena, iBeacons talk to your phone or your iPad, and they give you useful information that can be sourced from, for example, the Europeana database. Audio guides can be made from it. So there's a strong element of curation in it. But cities like Siena, who want to develop themselves into smart cities, which is what many of these cities want, and want to attract more cultural tourists, may really take advantage of this. So Europeana may not be an investor in this, but will at least put the resources in to make this an open source and a replicable piece of code that can be reused whenever we want for everyone's advantage. So, final takeaways. We need to evaluate success critically, like in the business world. Always attention, money, not money, business, public sector. We're trying to innovate that here, reimagine that, right? I mean, that's what we need to do. So, need to do that. Kill ideas with no future, invest in the best we have. And invest in design, business modeling, and promotion. So this is what I'd like to bring to the table today in the hope to stimulate good discussions in the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry. And so it leads me to welcome our second keynote speaker. Again, a very warm welcome to Piero Attanasio. Thank you very much.